Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm just going to be showing you my process of doing a pet portrait. And as you can tell, I took some burnt umber and I just kind of coated the canvas with it very lightly so that I don't really have such a stark white background. And I did a quick rough outline. I'm putting in some darks. For this painting, I used a very limited palette. I used burnt umber, raw sienna, burnt sienna, Naples yellow light, ultramarine blue, white, Mars black, so titanium white. Not just plain white, but titanium white because the different whites do different things. And I also used a very little bit of cadmium-free yellow, which I thought really enhanced the creaminess of the white. So it's a limited palette, and I didn't really use much more than that. I laid down the initial colors, like the base colors, and I went in. Initially, I thought I wanted a lot of fur definition, but in the end, I thought maybe I should change my process. So I'm showing you everything from beginning to end, how I get to where I get to. And sometimes we make mistakes and I change my mind along the way. But what I did like was to have a very defined fur structure as the underpainting. And that kind of shows through when I do layers of paint on top that are transparent. So I do glazes on top of my fur definition that I'm doing right now. So I did one eye, and I always warn against this, but I did this anyway. I developed one eye, but I have the proportions right, so I think I can do that with a little bit of confidence. And I'm going in and adding strokes for fur. And I'm following just the way the light hits her face. And be sure to never really just start with pure white. The white's just too white at that point. There's no tint to it. There's nothing exciting to it. It's just plain old white. And that's rarely the case that I have found. I tinted mine here with a little bit of Naples yellow light or cadmium yellow light and a little bit of raw umber or burnt sienna. And that kind of gives me variation in the whites, and it kind of pulls together in the rest of the fur as well. So this is really unexciting. I'm just going in and adding detail to the fur. And that's basically what I do this entire time. So I'm also just putting in the background because I want to see how it relates to the subject matter. I chose a blue and I know I'm going to change it because I don't like how it plays off against the fur of the little puppy. But for right now, I think it will do. It will give me some idea and some context, and I'm just okay with that. And remember, a painting goes through many cycles, or at least mine do. So in the middle, I do things, I experiment, and sometimes it turns out that my experiments may need tweaking, and I just go and redo them. And honestly, oil paints are so forgiving. You can afford to do revisions if you don't like what you have on hand. So I'm going to go in and add a deeper blue to the background. I have added ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and a little bit of Mars black, and that's doing okay for me, but I'm still not in love with it, but I think it does a better job because I just wanted to show how important a background is. The previous background that I had, the blue one, it competed too much in tonal values to the portrait of the little dog. They were just too similar. Nothing really stood out too much, and I wasn't really a fan of it. But I'm keeping this because even though this is not the final version, this gives a much better context, and this is the direction that I want to take the painting. So I did use a little bit of pure white on the reflection in the eye, I went in and I added a little bit of raw sienna to the eyes as well, just to play with the gaze of the puppy. The eyes are really, really expressive, and I wanted to bring out just the emotions that you kind of see in the dog's face. And the darkness around her eyes, remember, look for the light in the dark and the dark in the light. What do I mean by that? Well, wherever you have darks, they're never really flat. There's always some variation, and around the eyes, there was definitely a little bit of shimmer from the eyes reflecting, or there were tears, or whatever it is that was there, it was reflecting light. So I added that, and in my lights, there's also a fair bit of variation, because it's not just pale white fur. And I know that I made the fur a little bit too dark, but we're going to correct that later on. Right now, I'm going to go in and add the other eye and kind of just bring definition there as well. So I'm giving a little bit of depth to the eye this way with a little bit of burnt sienna. And I'm just blending that into the rest of the eye. And it helps to work wet in wet sometimes, because I am blending the burnt sienna into the Mars Black and burnt umber that I have in there. Just pull the black and the lighter shade together. I've blended enough where I think that it looks very cohesive, and I'm darkening the part with the pupil. Gonna get some catch light in there. I'm using a little bit of a blue. I lightened up my ultramarine blue with titanium white, and I'm adding that to the surrounding tissue of the eyes. I'm adding a little bit more lighter blue just to make it more prominent. And I'm going to go in and add just a little bit of white, pure titanium white, to just bring a little bit of oomph to the catch light. I'm adding it around the eye as well, just to give that reflective feel. And I'm just going to put more of the fur in. I'm just detailing it more. I'm giving a little bit more definition to the rest of her body, and I'm fleshing that out a little bit more. The base colors are what I'm going to paint over, and I'm going to go in and add defined fur. I'm just going to use this as my base layer, actually, because I'm going to paint over that. I don't like how unfluffy the fur looks. I want it to look a little bit more playful in the end, but this will be a good base that I can base the painting on. So at this point, I took a step back and I realized I wanted the fur to be fluffier. This feeling of playfulness was missing from the portrait because she is a puppy. She's a lot more playful than how I think I portrayed her. So I went in with not a fine detail blush, but a brush that I could use to define the fur. I think it's a long flat, and it gave me some fur strokes, but it also allowed me to layer color through broader strokes, and I mixed my colors, the same colors I had put in below, and I created glazes with neomeglip, which is one of my favorite things to do. It just creates these beautiful glazes that I can play with. And I put layers of color over my previous work. This way I lightened up the feeling of the fur. I thought she was a little bit too dark, and it created fur with the definition that I had already given it underneath. And I'm just finishing up her harness over here, adding some details, signing. This little girl is all done.